I read chapter 2, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Why Teach Financial Literacy. Most people don't know the difference between an asset and a liability. And in order to grow rich, you need to understand the difference, and you'll need to understand how to manage the money that you already have. And that includes knowing which things to buy and which things not to buy. So together we'll break down this chapter and what we should be learning to become financially literate. But first, if you could do me a quick favor and you can hit that like button for me, it really helps me know if you like this type of content, and it helps the channel grow. So the first concept is, it's not how much money you make, but it's how much money you keep. And this is kind of twofold, because on one hand, you can make $10,000 a month and you can spend $10,000 a month. So in essence, you're not really keeping it. And yes, you'll have the higher lifestyle, because spending $10,000 a month probably means that you have a decent lifestyle. However, that's not the goal of being financially free. The other half that they touch on in this chapter is how much money you make also determines how much money you pay in taxes if you don't know how to protect yourself. So how much money you make and then how much money you keep is also kind of a segue into the tax conversation. So the basic theme of this chapter is rule number 1, which is the most important rule of all. You have to know the difference between assets and liabilities. The way the book explains it is, assets are things that put money into your pocket, and liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket. So just for some easy examples, a car is considered a liability because it produces no money, no income at all, and all it does is create a liability for you. And even if that car is paid off, it still is a liability because you still have registration, you still have type of maintenance or care of the vehicle. So all of these things put a car in the liability column, and that's kind of how we separate between the two, is asset columns and liability columns. A form of an asset would be a business. The point of that business is to be an income producing business. Therefore, it will go in the asset column and it would be an income producing asset. So one of the distinguishing factors that he makes in regards to the rich versus the poor or middle class is the rich buy assets. They don't buy liabilities. Now, I know that seems counterintuitive because I know you're thinking, or a lot of rich people own fancy cars and Lamborghinis and Ferraris because who else is buying those? And while that is true, they buy liabilities once their income producing assets can afford that particular liability. So it's always looking at two columns, your liability column and your asset column. As long as your asset column is out producing your liability column, then you're doing great. So another easy way to think of assets and liabilities is assets bring income while liabilities bring bills. In the context that we want to explore the asset versus liability, we're talking about your personal finances. When you own a business and you run that balance sheet with your assets and your liabilities, those are going to be straight cut an expense for the business as opposed to the income side of the business. So for this context, we're just talking about your personal finances. So one of the main things he drives home as far as like an actionable step, so to speak, is if you want to be rich, then buy assets. Don't buy liabilities. He puts it pretty blunt. If you want to be rich, then buy assets. If you want to be poor, then continue to buy liabilities. Another part of financial literacy is, again, learning how to manage your money. So earning more money or earning money faster is not going to solve your root problem. Where you feel that your bills are always weighing you down, meaning you're like paycheck to paycheck, then you have a spending problem. And the only thing that you really can do to get out of this spending problem is to reduce your spending. Because if you make more money, all you're going to do is increase your spending by that same amount that you made it. Robert Kiyosaki goes out of his way to prove that buying a house is not an asset. Now, again, if we're talking about your personal responsibilities, then buying a home, a traditional house for you and your family to live in, for him, that is considered a liability, not an asset. And that's because it doesn't produce an income. If you're buying a single family property in order to rent it out, that is then turned into an asset because now it is bringing an income. A lot of people think that because when you buy a house, you get tax write-offs from the interest payments and the insurance, and you get appreciation, so the house is sometimes worth more. But none of these things actually put active money into your pocket. And also none of them are guarantees. One of the things that he says that he does is when he wants to buy a bigger house or a nice car, he forces himself to go out and buy more assets to counteract whatever he's about to spend on his liability side. He says, this pattern of treating your home as an investment and the philosophy that a pay raise means you can buy a larger home or spend more is the foundation of today's debt-ridden society. And the only source of the middle class's income is their paycheck. And that is huge. And it's crazy that this book was literally written like 30 years ago. I think I looked it up and it's exactly 29 years old. And we're still in a debt-ridden society. We're still spending more every time we get a pay raise, every time we, change jobs. we spend more money. And that handicaps us because if you're always paycheck to paycheck, there's nothing left to invest. And honestly, this portion about buying assets was the exact thing that made me start buying rental houses, because I realized that having just my paycheck alone wasn't gonna cut it. Jobs these days don't promise any type of real stability when it comes to retirement. I'm not interested in just having a 401k or hoping that this company carries me for the next 20 or 25 years. So for me, I needed to diversify so that I can protect our family and our family's future. So that was the goal for me. The focus is to buy income producing assets. So whether that be real estate, whether that be a business, whether that be YouTube, whether that be buying royalties or stocks, anything that produces money, anything that produces cash flow or income, that's where you want to be spending your time and your money. So if you're unable to do that because you're paycheck to paycheck, then you really have to start looking at reducing your expenses first. And as you do that and you're able to start taking that money and investing it, then that pay raise is going to come in the form of assets that you put in. So there's 3 hard truths that he presents in this chapter that I want to outline for you. I'm going to read it. Number 1, you work for the company. Employees make their business owners or shareholders rich, not themselves. Your efforts and success will provide for the owner's success in retirement, not yours. Number 2, you work for the government. The government takes a share from your paycheck before you even see it. And by working harder, you simply increase the amount of taxes taken by the government. Most people work from January to May just for the government. So just for taxes from January to May, all that money goes straight to the government. That's insane to think about. Hard truth number 3, you work for the bank. After taxes, your mortgage and credit card debt are usually your largest expense. All that money you're paying to the bank in interest fees make them richer, not you. The problem with simply working harder is that each of these 3 revelations take a greater share of your time, energy, and money. You need to learn how to have your efforts benefit you directly and your family. So your goal overall is to build an asset that makes you financially independent. Then once you have a certain amount of assets, then you can take that money without doing any extra effort and just reinvest it over and over and over again. Overall, if you think about it, a lot of this chapter is really redundant. And I say that in a good way because the whole point is to drill the idea home that you need more assets and you need less liabilities. If you focus on just doing that alone, then you'll be far richer and more financially secure than almost anybody that you know. The rich buy assets, poor only have expenses. The middle class buy liabilities that they think are assets. So this comes from that disconnect between buying a house. It is the American dream. I understand it. I own a home. Part of me in some aspects regret buying a home because I was living in my rental properties before and my mortgage chunk of my income was offset by my portfolio. But now I have a home and it is still a big chunk, our financials each month. So to a degree, I kind of regret it. I fall into the same trap, married, starting a family, wanted space for our kids, wanted a space to, plant down our roots. So I get it. I understand it. And, that's just kind of how, again, that's just a part of the American dream. But that still didn't stop us from being able to strike out and buy some level of assets, which we're still doing today. We're still focused on buying rental property and we're looking at starting our stock portfolio. So that is definitely in the works. So this basically laid the foundation for what financial literacy is and how you can start to get ahead in life. And this really can just start as small wins by just cutting off one bill, paying off one piece of debt, and then taking whatever excess you get and going to invest in something. I think the simplest thing and the smallest thing that you could invest in is probably the stock market. I kick myself every day for not starting to invest in the stock market 10, 15 years ago, but life is life. So, we learn from that. The next chapter we'll explore in this book, chapter number 3, explore how to start minding your own business. I'm super excited for this one. Tons of nuggets littered throughout this entire book. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you like this video, then go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'll see you guys tomorrow for chapter 3. You got a good book, baby?